Hi everybody, Jennifer Schaus here, coming to you live today from Washington, D.C. And thank you for joining us in our complimentary webinar series covering the DFARS, the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement. Our webinars are every Wednesday and Friday, unless there's a holiday. It is Good Friday today, but we are still here. You can find all of our government contracting webinars over on the YouTube channel. There's a library there of 700 plus complimentary videos. We cover everything from the FAR, the DFARS, FAR supplements, as well as strategic and tactical topics. You can find all of the corresponding PowerPoints over on slideshare.net, and you can log into slideshare.net using your LinkedIn credentials. We also have advertising and sponsorship opportunities available in our webinar series. In order to register for the DFARS, in case you did not navigate this way to actually get to the series, over on our website, just click on the section called the DFARS. Keep in mind, on the left-hand side, you'll see that we did actually cover the entire DFARS back in 2021, but because this actually has a heartbeat and is a living, breathing document, so to speak, it has gone through changes and sounds like it will potentially continue to do so. So everything on the left-hand side again is historical, and on the right-hand side you'll find the recordings for anything that we've completed, and then registration links for anything that we've yet to complete. A little bit about us: we are based in downtown DC and provide a variety of services that you see here on the screen for product, service, and software companies with a focus on working with established government contractors. Our primary focus is helping companies get onto the GSA Schedule and VA Schedule for medical products and medical services, and FedLink for any subscription services. The executive order that came out on March 20th has a pretty heavy focus on GSA. And making them the central hub for procurement. So if your company is interested in getting onto the GSA schedule, please contact us directly. The email is actually listed there twice on the screen. So just shoot us an email and we're happy to have an initial consultation with you to make sure this is in your best interest and then help you navigate the process. For companies that are selling to federal government contractors, so banks, law firms, insurance companies, payroll, the whole 9 yards, we do offer advertising and sponsor opportunities at events, in our webinars, and in our newsletter. The newsletter now reaches over 38,000 subscribers, which is potentially how you found out about this webinar. Most of our subscribers are in fact federal contractors. The open rates are actually now up to 29%. So we've climbed a percentage. We also want to thank our in-kind sponsors, GovEvents, Fairfax County Economic Development Authority, and Set Aside Alert. GovEvents is the premier platform for posting events and recordings related to government and government contracting. The Fairfax County Economic Development Authority has an online calendar of events and webinars, and both GovEvents and Fairfax County have all of our webinars as well as the recordings listed on them. Set Aside Alert is the go-to publication for finding opportunities related to small, women-owned, veteran-owned, hub zone, and 8A opportunities. If you visit setasidealert.com, you can get more information. We also want to thank the Virginia Apex Accelerator. They're a trusted resource and DLA, Defense Logistics Agency funded organization. They provide local training, counseling, and mentoring for aspiring government contractors, as well as matchmaking events. If you want to sell to state, local, education, or federal government, please contact your local Apex Accelerator. Visit the links on your screen to review the training calendar, locate free resources, and to schedule an appointment with a Virginia Apex Accelerator counselor today. We also want to thank our paid sponsors, which is what allows this webinar series to actually be free. The BidSpeed platform allows users to search public sector opportunities at the federal, state, and local level. Users can also find anything from a compliance matrix to teaming partners, incumbent point of contacts, expiring contracts, and proposal templates. Discover, manage, and secure government contracts with BidSpeed. BidSpeed is an official partner of the SBA's ETG Empower to Grow program. Contact BidSpeed today. C3, if you're thinking about contracting with the Department of Defense, you need to prepare for CMMC. the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. C3 suite of CMMC solutions include C3 Command, C3 Catalyst, and C3 Core. These solutions answer the needs of every defense contractor, whether your CMMC priority is a fast, defined path to compliance, or you need the flexibility to manage multiple environments. C3 offers solutions. They are your partner with a deep expertise in IT, cybersecurity, and compliance. Contact C3 today. WorkPlan. WorkPlan is an online contract management and accounting tool designed for federal contractors and hosted by Amazon Web Services. Get and stay DCAA compliant, manage expenses, timekeeping, and forecasting. Plus, use the WorkPlan platform to manage your capture process and your CRM. Contractors can also integrate their their human resources and payroll into this one easy to use solution. Contact WorkPlan today. Ateria. Ateria specializes in Microsoft Cloud licenses and services for government and government contractors. Ateria provides a business advantage for Microsoft Government Cloud licensing, managed IT administration and security, as well as data intelligence services and solutions. They implement secure, compliant, and scalable solutions to enhance operations, reduce risk, and uncover opportunities. Contact Ateria for expert IT assistance today. Okay, last but not least, we want to thank our friends over at Gov White Papers. Gov White Papers is the central hub for government and government contractors to find and post content geared towards solving public sector challenges. With your free membership, you can add relevant white papers, case studies, data sheets, and more, making your content available to a wider government audience. Have the expertise but not the content? Gov White Papers can also create materials to meet your specific needs. Join for free today at govwhitepapers.com. Alrighty, the reason we are here today is to cover the DFARS Part 217, which is Special Contracting Methods. We have three lovely ladies from Cohen-Resnick who are joining us today. They've got some great slides put together. And without further ado, I'm going to turn the floor over to Lori Allen. Lori, it's great to have you and your teammates here today, and I will put myself on mute, and the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. We really appreciate the opportunity to cover this topic on your platform today. As Jennifer said, I am Lori Allen. I'm with Cohen-Resnick. And Cohen-Resnick's government contracting industry practice helps federal contractors optimize performance by providing strategic advice on compliance and federal regulations, while also providing a full range of audit, tax, and business advisory services. We provide full life cycle support for your contract. And as you seek to grow, we help you stay ahead of the curve by implementing proactive strategies to increase profitability and competitiveness while minimizing the cost and effects of regulatory compliance. A little bit about me personally is that I've been with Cohen-Resnick for 6 years now, and I was with DCAA for about 9 years prior to that, and I was in corporate accounting for about 10 years prior to that. So if you see my profile pic there with all that lovely gray hair, I earned every strand in this lovely accounting profession. In my career, I have worked with the Department of Defense, Department of Energy, NASA, FEMA, NOAA, CMS. I'm sure there's some others back there too. I perform a variety of audits and advise on cost allowability, allocability, and reasonableness. And sometimes reasonableness and compliance realism and compliance depending on whether we're looking at systems, incurred costs, CAS, the whole gamut there. So one of the unique things about Cohen-Resnick is that we do have both an audit and advisory practice. Laura and I both work on the audit side of the house, and Georgina works on our advisory side of the house. So we're going to bring you a lot of great information from both sides of the table, so to speak, today. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our next presenter, which is Georgina.
Hello, everyone. As Lori said, I'm with Cohen-Resnick advisory side. In my past, I worked for DCAA, so I was on the audit side for many, many years. And then I worked for Deloitte on their advisory side, and now I'm here at Cohen-Resnick. But I've been with GovCon for over 20 years. I love this space. It's a great space to be, especially right now. So from that, I will pass it on to Laura.
Hello, everyone. My name is Laura Cloyd Hall. I have been with CONRASNIC for about 8 months, but prior to that, I was with DCAA for 37 years, so government contracting is in my blood. I've been doing it a long time, had a lot of experiences, and looking forward to the opportunity of sharing some of the examples of things I've run into in relation to some of these special contracting methods. So with that, I will turn it over to Lori to start talking about our objectives.
Thanks, Laura. And exactly, we're just going to learn about the different special contracting methods, recognize the different uses for them, and then understand the benefits of them. So let's dive right in. On the next slide, we give you an overview of the full DFARS 217 section. And I want to point out where we start here. We've got 217.1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 7. And when we get to 7, there's a bunch of supplemental parts to section 7. So the earlier sections we'll talk about independently, and then when we get down to that section 7, we're going to speak to those individual subparts as it relates to that interagency acquisitions. So let's dive right into the content. I believe Laura is going to kick us off with 217 part 1. Laura, over to you.
Thank you, Lori. So once again, hello and happy Friday to everyone. The slides you see on the screen and those that are following behind it have a lot of information, and it's all to show you how the FAR and DFARS align for the majority of these special contracting methods. So don't worry, we were not going to read these slides to you. We're just providing them for your future reference. We're actually going to talk about some of the requirements and share some examples. So with that, jumping right into multi-year contracts. You will see as we go through the 3 slides on this topic that there are several areas mentioned in which the multi-year contracts can be used. So let me say, spoiler alert, those areas are services, supplies, military family housing, and electricity from renewable energy sources. So on the next slide, we first see that services is the main topic on this one, talking about the different covered services and some requirements related to a written determination. Again, I'm not going to read the slides to you, and but there is one thing I wanted to share first before I start talking about some examples of multi-year contracts I've seen. It's going to relate to the cost. And just to be clear, I'm not giving you a lesson on present value analysis. However, in this case, it's pretty simple. The present value is the current value of the future stream of cash. So in essence, the present value of the multi-year contract needs to be proven to be significantly lower than the cost of issuing a new contract every year. Pretty straightforward. So with that, I want to talk about a couple of my favorite examples of a multi-year contract, just to give you a flavor of what they look like. I had the opportunity to work with one of the Air Force agencies. It was the Air Force Civil Engineer Center. They handle a lot of the environmental cleanup at military bases, not just Air Force, but actually across several of the departments. So a very interesting one that I ran into was an environmental remediation service specifically for cleanup of groundwater contamination. That's a mouthful, by the way. But this type of cleanup effort requires some significant startup costs like securing the site. They have to test the water and the soil to identify what the contaminant is and the extent of that contamination. So in this case, based on the startup cost alone, it was very easy to prove that the present value of the multi-year contract was significantly lower than issuing a new contract to potentially a new contractor every year. But one of the issues that they run into relates to the last bullet on this slide, with the written determination being that they have to document that the contract will be less than $750 million. As you can imagine, some of these cleanup sites at especially Air Force bases with all the jet fuel that they had to clean up were very, very large. And so there ended up being the Air Force Civil Engineer Center had to come up with a contracting plan that would comply with that DFARS requirement. So moving on to the next slide, I want to give you one more example that, again, is one that I found interesting. It has to do with a multi-year contract for military family housing. This one was interesting because it was for maintenance and operations of houses on the National Register of Historic Places. For those of you who are not aware, this is a very unique challenge. So houses on the National Register must be maintained to its registered specifications. So for example, if you've got a house that needs a new roof, that roof must match the former roof in style, color, and materials. So you can't take one that has a clay tile roof and put shingles on it. And another example we ran into was that a house had to be repainted. Well, you had to take a little piece of the paint and go to a paint store and have them match the paint exactly. And then the person from the National Registry that was assigned to make sure the contractor doing the work complied with everything was checking off the boxes, making sure everything matched up. So it was definitely an interesting learning experience for me and for the contractor, having to learn a lot of special rules in addition to the normal FAR and DFARS requirements, which in turn would make this very expensive to award to a new contractor every year. So proving that they were complying with that requirement to have the present value of the multi-year contract be significantly less than the cost of issuing a new contract every year. So, Lori, I've heard that you have a little experience to share about multi-year contracts, right?
I do. I like to tell some of the bad stories. So you have to be careful in multi-year contracting that you, it's one thing to get into a bad contract that's 1 year long. It's another thing to get into a bad contract that is many years long. So anytime you're doing any kind of multi-year contracting action, you want to make sure that you get all possible consulting parties involved. Make sure it goes through thorough legal review. Make sure it's fact checked by someone independent, and just so you can get a fresh take and a fresh look. I had a client who did all of the right things, went through all of the right processes, and in the end, his contract was awarded for a multi-year contract. And the fee was listed in the proposal in 2 different areas. The fee on subcontractors was calculated at 6% fixed fee, and the fee on everything else was at 7% fixed fee. Well, when the contract was written, they included the 6% subcontract fee in cost and not in the fixed fee line item. So they signed a contract that only had 7% fixed fee on all costs other than subcontracts, and this had probably a good 50% of subcontract effort. So you can imagine the government not wanting to renegotiate or modify that contract to include, basically twice the fee that they originally awarded as a guaranteed fixed fee. So just be careful you're dotting your I's, crossing your T's. Again, it's one thing to get into a bad one-year contract. It's really bad to get locked into a multi-year contract that was written bad. So always be aware of those risks that you're setting yourself up for, and make sure you're fact checking everything in every space. So with that, we're going to move on to the next part, which is options and option periods. So this is where you're going to get into a multi-year contract, but it's got option periods where you're not locked in right away. You're going to exercise those options if both parties want to at that specific option period time. So these, as Laura mentioned before, the DFARS add on to the FAR to give DOE contracts a little bit of extra that they need to be managed effectively with specific considerations for military sales and long-term procurement needs. And we're going to see a lot about long-term needs, which tends to happen in this military space. And this is a lot of what these DFARS talk to us about in this particular area. So the timing can be up to 5 years, but cannot exceed, it can be 10, but it cannot exceed 10 without exceptional circumstances. Some of those exceptional circumstances are exactly what Laura said. When we've got these big waste cleanup sites, the amount of effort it takes in to bring sites up to speed and get them working and operational, and all of the equipment and all of the institutional knowledge and everything, it's hard to want to start over with a brand new contractor. So sometimes they might recompete because they have to, but they still tend to end up awarding it to the same contractor over and over and over again for very long periods of time. In exercising options, remember that you always need to consider the requirements in FAR first and how they may also impact the circumstance. So in addition to the requirements in FAR 17207C, you should exercise an option only after determining that the contractor's record in the system for SAM database is active and their data is accurate and complete. The contractor's unique identifier, commercial and government entity or cage code name and physical address are correct, and more references to other sources, because you can't be in the FAR or the DFARS without referencing 10 other sources in 10 other places. You also need to see the PGI 217.207 for the requirement to perform cost analysis or price analysis for spare parts if you've got a firm fixed price contract. You need to verify supplier performance risk systems. You need to make sure that you have a summary level score of a current NIST SP 800-101, which is related to making sure you have secure systems to support controlled unclassified information. And this is the new one of the new updates or changes, is that the contractor has a CMMC certificate at the level required by the contract, and that it is current, which means not more than 3 years old. And that again references 204.7502. So I know that was a big mouthful in the options, but those are really the key things that you need to be thinking about when you're thinking about options. All right, I'm going to turn it over to interagency acquisitions on the next slide with Georgina.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Lori and Laura. So interagency transactions is when the DoD contracts with Department of Energy or HHS or DLA. That's usually a typical one, where DLA does the CAT cards when you're abroad, and for all of DoD. It's just a contract that they have with them, but that is what we consider an interagency acquisition. And they have, of course, a bunch of rules and regulations that need to be followed when the two agencies come together. Most importantly, it has to be in writing. And it covers everything except for micro purchases. Let me be more specific, I'm sorry. The DFARS 217.5 requires that any interagency procurement must be in writing unless it is a micro purchase between the two agencies. They do have very specific other rules that we included on the next slide, where you must follow Piece 217.502-1A1. I know that's a lot, that's why we included it here. And here you'll see again, it is stating that it must be in writing. There's very specific forms that need to be filled out. Of course, you know, this is the DoD, we like our forms. And basically, you have to make sure that both parties are equal and agree on the services. And that is all really for interagencies. So let me pass this, I believe, back to Laura.
All right, so I'm back again. So I'm going to first start off and say that we have a quality control failure. The first word in the M should be management, not maintenance. And I apologize for that. We will try to get that corrected and maybe before the slides are posted. And so the next thing I'll point out is the big bold right underneath that title is that it doesn't apply to DoD. I'm going, okay, so who does it apply to? Well, that's where the FAR comes in. So let's talk a little bit about what M&O contracts are, management and operating. See, I'm still reading the top of the slide. Management and operating contracts are and who uses them. So the DFARS 17.600 says that DOE uses them and any other agency with that statutory authority. The interesting thing about these awards is that they are almost always full and open competition with a base of 5 years and 15 plus award term options. So this is really a unique type of multi-year contract, if you will, which is why it really doesn't apply to DoD, because DoD has chosen not to use the management and operating contracts due to the length of the terms. But I wanted to give you just an example because, you know, the first thing I thought of when I was preparing this to talk about this topic is like, well, what's an example of a management and operating contract? So I found one. I just used my friend Google and I said, give me an example of a management and operating contract. So I found one that's with the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, and that is part of the Department of Energy. The contractor is required to, according to their job description on this contract, use its best efforts to provide the necessary personnel, equipment, materials, supplies, services, or anything else that is needed to perform the statement of work. So I read that, and I don't know about you, but I'm still not sure what that means. So again, I went back to Google and I said, well, what does Oak Ridge National Laboratory actually do? Well, they deliver scientific discoveries and technical breakthroughs, and basically to get to good solutions for clean energy or global security. And basically the contractor is responsible for developing and implementing those innovative approaches and using whatever means they have to foster that continuous improvement to help accomplish the laboratory's mission. So what really happens is the contractor is that management and operating contractor is creating and maintaining the environment at the laboratory to be able to use the talents and capabilities that the workforce has. So that is the purpose. That is the special relationship that it creates between the government and the contractor. So that was a little bit I learned about management and operating contracts. Again, not applicable to DoD, but certainly used by DOE at multiple laboratories that they actually have. So I will say that I'm going to turn it over, I believe, to Lori to talk about some interagency acquisitions.
So Laura, I think it's kismet that happens to be because you said you were going to look up an example, but I didn't know which example you were going to bring to the table. And I love that is the example you brought to the table because I've been there, so I can speak to it specifically. So that specific Oak Ridge National Laboratory is managed by UT Battelle. UT is the University of Tennessee, and Battelle is the Battelle Memorial Institute. So they formed a partnership, and they operate that site on behalf of the Department of Energy. And they do a gazillion amazing things there. And just like I don't remember the specific tagline you said was their mission statement, but I'll always remember this when I was on site. She said their mission is to solve tomorrow's problems today. And that resonated with me, and I'll always remember that. They have a nuclear power source there. They have the latest and greatest supercomputer there. They have the prior versions, and they're currently building a new version. They do this, I'm probably saying it wrong, neuron spallation research, but it's all kinds of research, just like they said, solving tomorrow's problems today. But this site is owned by the Department of Energy. It's just operated by UT Battelle. So very interesting relationship there and how all of that works. And I love that that's the one that you came up with, because I have some personal experience there and got to go out and see a lot of the stuff. So that was really cool. So moving on, where are we now? 217.7. So this is where I said we're going to kind of introduce this topic, and there's a bunch of subtopics related to it. And this is interagency acquisitions by non-defense agencies on behalf of the Department of Defense. So these additional regulations here ensure that interagency acquisitions are managed effectively with specific considerations, of course, for the Department of Defense, and the things that they need, like implementation of some special NDAA sections, acquiring supplies and services through non-DoD contracts. It provides some special definitions, prescribes procedures for ordering, approving, evaluating, and administering, and reporting. So let's dive into the first subsection, which is the exchange of personal property. And I believe this one is still with me. So the use of this is to manage the exchange of personal property within the Department of Defense, ensuring that exchanges are conducted efficiently and economically. This helps maintain operational readiness and optimizing resource utilization. You can definitely tell I'm reading that piece from a screen because that's their tagline related to why they want to exchange personal property. They want to keep using their resources to the best of their ability. Now, two things I want to point out here are the definitions. Always seek out definitions when they provide them, any kind of definition section, as they're not always as intuitive as you would think, especially when we need to specifically refer to another source. So in this case, the DoD Manual 4140.01, Volume 9, gives us the definition for property. So it's not just as intuitive as you would think. There's a whole manual and a whole section that speaks to it, and you want to make sure you understand what that means if you're going to get into this type of contracting. Second is there's no requirement for foreign exchange just because one is available. In the end, the decision is likely going to be on the basis of the lowest evaluated offer. So with the government, they're always trying to do the lowest dollar value. I think that's all I have here. I'm going to turn this one over to Laura. Actually, I fibbed. It's Georgina.
To me. So this one's a lot of fun. It's, you know, the repair and alterations of our Navy fleet. So all the ships and the vessels, and I know it's not just Navy. There's other departments that have ships as well, but we always usually relate it to the Navy. So this DFARS is really just specifically to that, to the repairing of vessels and what needs to be in place between agencies when this is going to happen. Well, actually between DoD and another agency when this is going to happen. And interestingly enough, there is two terms that I really wanted to point out that are kind of unique to this DFARS, that there's a master agreement, a written instrument. This kind of, not to read right off the slide, but it is the overarching agreement that you would have between the two agencies that kind of settles the price and all the contract terms. We do see this outside of this DFARS, you know, where you'll have a basic order agreement and then CLINs underneath that you order to, and this has what they call the master agreement, and then there's job orders underneath it, which are firm fixed price. So just different terms, but same principles and ideas. And then as you see that they have different ideas of when you can use the master order agreement, but again, always a job order falls underneath that. And then next slide, one thing we really wanted to call out is when you are creating these master agreements for the repair of vessels, these contract clauses must be included into that agreement. So they specifically call out in the DFARS that these, what is it, 12, 14 clauses have to be in there. So just if you do these contracts, now you've got this friendly slide to refer to make sure you've got all of those included. And I will pass it over to Laura.
All right, so this topic is identification of sources of supply, and it is exactly what the title says. Very straightforward, that the sources that are the actual manufacturers for any supplies furnished to DoD must be identified. And there's some specific identification requirements, which I'm not going to read to you. But the idea is that is to enable future purchases of these supplies to be obtained from the same manufacturer as is currently being used. The point I will make on this is the very last two items, which is saying that that information is not required to be submitted when you're providing commercial products, or if it is valued at below the simplified acquisition threshold, which is $250,000. So that is all I have on that topic. So I am going to turn it over to Lori to talk about undefinitized contract actions.
So we literally are just rotating. We just said, okay, who's going to take the first one? And then we rotated through to see who was going to speak to each of these bullet points. And I think it's interesting that I got the ones that are the cautionary tales. So I'm gonna give another cautionary tale here, like I did in the multi-year contracts and the option periods, when we're talking about undefinitized contracting actions. And this is where there is some kind of special circumstance that you have to get working on the contract before the contract is completely written and negotiated. That leaves both parties open to a lot of risk. There can be cost overruns. There can be lack of clear requirements where you think you're tasked with A and you really need to be doing B. Delay of definition. There are rules and guidelines and things that say you have to do things in certain periods of time, but especially since we're talking about the military here, we're talking about war zones and things that are happening in real time. You may not be able to, that the environment might be changing so quickly and significantly that those time requirements go out the door. So it's very important that you have good, strong relationships with your contractors and contracting officers. And I think we're in a space right now with the mass exodus of people from the government and the changing environment that we're losing some of those longstanding relationships. So building new relationships and new partnerships with the government is going to be very important, especially if you're going to get into any of these risky spaces. I have a personal example when I was working for DCAA where I was auditing the proposal, and it was undefinitized up until it was 80% complete. And this situation was there was a runway that was bombed and it had to be rebuilt. Well, I can promise you what it cost to build it the first time is not what it cost to build it the second time. And there was a lot of argument about the cost to remove all of the rubble and remove all of the debris and clear the pathway to build the new one. I promise you that the people who did it the first time did not charge as much as the people who had to go back out there a second time. Because once something's been bombed and you know that you already knew there was danger, and now you really know that there's danger, you're working in a very hazardous place, your base pay isn't going to be the same as it was the first time around. So the government was kind of on the hook to pay a lot more cost than they thought they would have to. And the contractor was on the hook because they paid the people what the environment demanded to get the work done so the runway could get up and running so they could, bring the people back in and out. So when you think about it from that perspective, there's a lot of risk to both sides. You don't know how much things are going to cost. You don't know how much it's going to overrun. You don't know what it's going to take to get the job done. You're just kind of out there, boots on the ground, and saying, okay, let's dig into this mess and let's get it done because we have to get this repaired and we want to be good stewards of the government. And so there has to be a lot of trust there, is all I'm saying. There needs to be some good trust there to want to get into any of these undefinitized contract actions because there's risk to both sides. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Georgina to talk about replenishing parts.
So replenishing parts is really small. As you can see by the slide, there's not a ton of stuff in there. It's just basically, again, doesn't include micro purchases, has to be written. It also says to follow the PGI that I referenced in the prior slide, which, like we said, as you have to be written. It doesn't include micro purchases. There needs to be specific clauses. So nothing different here. It's kind of more just calling out specifically replenishment parts, whereas the other DFARS talks about parts and services. I guess they felt that they needed to have a specific slide for, or specific DFARS for the replenishment of parts, but it isn't anything different than the other, than the interagency requirements of make sure it's in writing, make sure both parties sign, make sure both parties fill out the required forms. And again, it just doesn't apply to micro purchases. But there is also one part to call out, though. There is the Economic Act order, and with that, there's a few more regulations like FAR 17.502 that need to be followed, but really those don't really state anything different than what's already in the PGI and within the DFARS. So it's just kind of closing the whole loop, making sure that that order was supported by regulation. And I will now pass it back to Laura.
All right, thank you, Georgina. So up next is contracting with provisioning requirements. So Lori, I actually got one of those cautionary tale moments here. We'll start with the fact that this DFARS citation actually comes up and tells you to follow the procedures at PGI 217.7601 if you have a contract with provisioning requirements. So I think, as Lori mentioned, or maybe Georgina, both of them may have said, you know, it's really good when the FAR or DFARS or somebody defines things for you. So in this case, we actually do have a pretty decent definition of what provisioning is. So I went ahead and put that on here just to give you that information. And I wanted to take a minute to talk about some of the key types of contracts that often have provisioning requirements in them. So one being the defense contracts that will typically have provisioning for military equipment or systems to make sure they stay fully operational and that they're supported throughout their life cycle. Another one is in the aerospace industry, right? And there's always got to be somebody maintaining the functionality and safety of the aircraft. And then some others are like large-scale engineering projects. That would be maybe major infrastructure, maybe, and you are maintaining that infrastructure through providing whatever parts or equipment are needed for the maintenance and operation of that major infrastructure. So it's just kind of some general examples of where you might see that. The thing about these in the cautionary part is the section I put on the slide. It is so very important that you understand the specific provisioning functions that are going to be performed. If you do nothing else, make sure you know what you're signing up for with these contracts that have the provisioning requirements. So what those specific functions are, who's going to perform those functions, and a big key thing is how long are you going to have to perform those functions. So before you sign that contract, make sure that you know and understand those three things, because you will typically get a detailed list as part of your contract as to what those functions are. They'll give you specific instructions and often will have a schedule. So make sure you look for those things. If they are not in that contract, I would ask for that information to be added to your contract, because you could get into something that they're going to say, well, you know, this thing, its life cycle is, you know, 100 years, and we're going to have you maintain it for 100 years. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm not planning on being around in 100 years. So don't think I'd want to sign a contract with something that's got 100 years worth of work. Look for it to be reasonable. Don't sign up for something when you don't really know what the cost of it to do that function is going to be in, let's say, even 20 years. So think about that, understand those things, and there was my cautionary tale. So with that, I believe I will be turning it over to Lori for another cautionary tale about over and above work.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Laura. So over and above work is, let me think how I want to describe this. It's beyond the scope of the original contract. So you're in a contract, and to me, the best way to describe this is think about you have a contract to do oil changes on big, rugged military vehicles. And so you have to do an oil change. And the government knows that when you're doing that oil change, you might have to sometimes replace an oil gasket. You might strip a screw and have to replace some screws. You might have to do some things that are over and above the scope of work. And they understand that and they're open to that. So you're doing these things and you're getting these things done. And if it's over and above work, it's supposed to be pre-approved. You're supposed to have good conversations with your contracting officer. They're supposed to make themselves available to this. But let's be real, in the real world, you can't always do that. And sometimes, these machines have to get turned over very quickly. They're waiting for them in the field and they need them, and they need them now. So you might have to replace a screw. You might have to replace the whole oil pan. The whole mounting system bracket may have broken and you have to replace that, whatever it takes to get that vehicle running again. So the cautionary tale here is the burden of proof is on you to prove that you did all that you did and that it was necessary. The government and the auditors are going to come in and take an approach that you're doing unnecessary work. You really didn't need to do all of those things. You're just trying to make more money and take more money. I'm not saying that for real, but I'm saying, that's kind of the risk of it, is that you're taking advantage. And then contractors, you're on the risk side of, you understand that this work has to get done. All of these things have to get replaced, or the machine isn't going to work right, and it's carrying our troops. So you want these machines, whatever they are, whether they're ships, airplanes, helicopters, vehicles, whatever it is, you want to do right and not send something out onto the road that's going to be faulty. So you do this over and above work, and then you got to get the government to pay you for it. You got to come to an agreement there. So the cautionary tale here is really just cover your butt. Over document, take pictures, especially in today's environment, pictures, videos, schematics, prints, anything that you can do to provide and prove your case and make it very, very easy to prove your case is going to just put you in a much better position. But this is the government obviously recognizes the need for over and above work. They have a whole section related to it. But then coming to an agreement about was it really justified or not is often the issue. And while you're supposed to agree to it up front, the real world is just very different. In a perfect world, sure. In the real world, it can't always happen. So that's the cautionary tale there. If you're gonna open yourself up to risk, just make sure you cover your butt and document it 3 ways from Sunday to make sure that you've got everything that you need to support your position and why you did the over and above work that you did. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Georgina to take us home on our last section of this DFARS. Georgina, take us into reverse auctions.
All right, last but certainly not least, reverse auctions. It kind of goes with the theme that Laura's talking about, that the DoD, really wants to make sure to get full use out of everything that they purchase and procure in their different contracts. So they do have regulations, though, about what can be done with reverse auctions. Very specifically, it does, the regulation does state that reverse auctions for procuring items designed as personal protective equipment or aviation critical safety items is not allowed. I'm guessing that's because they don't want to give a false impression of, have something happen to somebody and the safety equipment didn't work. because you never know what happens when stuff gets sent downrange. Military isn't always known for treating things in the best manner once they get down there, and the heat and the sand. My husband was down there 4 different times, and he just said it's brutal and messes stuff up pretty bad. So even if they don't get it out of the box, it doesn't always mean that it's still working properly. And then this is actually one of the ones that came about from the 2017 NDAA, which is interesting because oftentimes these are written by a DFARS council through the executive branch instead of through Congress. So this is one of those unique ones where it is supporting current legislation written by Congress. And if you do not know what constitutes a critical safety item or personal protective equipment, they do include that in the DFARS definitions, 252-209-7010. But other than that, everything else is pretty much fair game. They do have limited rates, and as you can see here, it can't exceed 6 months. If you want to extend the reverse auction, it only can go out for an extra 6 months. And that's pretty much it. I think we have fully covered DFARS 217, and appreciate you joining us today to learn all about it. And I will pass it back to Lori to close us out.
Thank you so much, Laura and Georgina. I really appreciate you taking the time to present with me today. Thank you, Jennifer. We really appreciate this opportunity. As Jennifer mentioned, and I'm sure she's going to reiterate, all of this information, the slide decks and materials will all be available for download and rewatch on YouTube. If you want to take a screenshot now, feel free to reach out to me or Georgina or Laura at any time. I know there's not a specific Q&A turned on during the presentation, but if you do have any follow-up questions, we welcome the reach out. You can reach out to us on LinkedIn as well. We'd love to connect with you. Laura or Georgina, any additional closing words before we turn it back over to Jennifer?
Just to reiterate, please reach out. We did try to put as much information as we could on the slide so that way you would have it for yourself. But if something doesn't make sense, or we didn't address an area that you specifically were wondering about, yes, please reach out to any one of us, and we can always collaborate with the other 2 and get you that answer that you need.
Great.
Absolutely. We're here for you.
Sounds great. Thanks, ladies. I feel like I have nothing left to say except just to remind everybody that if you are with us here today for the live presentation, again, the recording will be available within 24 hours over on YouTube. The PowerPoint slides might have an edit, and those will be available on slideshare.net. You can log in with your LinkedIn credentials or a Yahoo or Gmail account. In the event that you're watching this recording on YouTube, give us a like, leave a comment. We would love to hear from you. All of your questions, again, should be addressed to the speakers. You've got their contact information. And again, thanks everybody. We will pick up next week on Wednesday with DFARS Part 218 and Friday Part 219. So thanks again, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.